Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us as we celebrate the last few days of Women's History Month. My name is Lisa Swenarski, and I'm the Cultural Attaché at the American Embassy here in Islamabad, Pakistan. I think one of the best ways to celebrate Women's History Month is by showcasing the very strong and determined women that have contributed so much to their countries and their communities despite many obstacles. Today's webinar is about one of those women, Indu Mitha, and about a film that was recently made about her called How She Moves, which captures her greatness. We're really pleased that all of you are joining us today. We are live not only on the PUAN Facebook page, but also the American Embassy in Islamabad and our 3 consulates in Peshawar, Karachi, and Lahore. Thanks for joining us. So as many of you probably know, Indu Mitha has been teaching the classical Bharatanatyam dance form in Pakistan for 60 years. Under her creative direction, stories traditionally associated with Hindu deities have been given a secular and a feminist flavor. While Bharatanatyam songs are usually in Tamil, Telugu, or Sanskrit, she has composed them in Urdu. Indriji was born in a Bengali Christian family and grew up in Lahore, and recently celebrated her 90th birthday. And just last week, received the very prestigious President's Award for Pride of Performance. Congratulations, Indriji. So on our panel tonight, we have 4 very distinguished guests. They are Tehreema Mitha, Dr. Feriyal Amal Aslam, Aisha Linnea, and Anya Raza. Let me tell you a little bit about each one of them. Tehreema Mitha is Mrs. Indu Mitha's daughter and her senior most disciple. A choreographer, dancer, composer in her own right for 35 years, she trained entirely in Pakistan, ran a dance company for 5 years in Islamabad before moving to her adopted country, the United States, where she is the artistic director of Tehreema Mitha Dance Company. She is known for her own unique styles of classical Bharatanatyam, bridging dances, and contemporary dances. With almost 70 original dances with specially composed musical scores, she continues to perform in the United States and in Pakistan. She is the subject of 3 documentaries, and she dances on The Vigil and Pushpanjali, besides being the subject of academic studies by Dr. Catherine Zubko and Dr. Hirji. She has recently started a YouTube channel, which you must visit, where she is releasing her archives for audiences worldwide, just to get a glimpse of the expanse of her work and its intricacy. Dr. Feriyal Amal Aslam is a scholar in dance history, a first in Pakistan, and describes herself as a peace activist. In 2004, Dr. Feriyal started a project on Indu Mitha's life and her work through the U.S. government's Fulbrighter program that funded her master's degree in anthropology at the University of Hawaii. She went on to earn her PhD in cultural and performance at the University of California in Los Angeles. And her dissertation was a critical biography of none other than Indu Mitha. As part of this project, she successfully applied for funding from the Pakistan-U.S. Alumni Network to make the documentary How She Moves. I hope all of you have seen that documentary before tonight's webinar, and if not, you'll want to see it afterwards. Now, moving on to Aisha Linnea and Anya Raza, they both co-directed How She Moves, and it's their first documentary. Ms. Akhtar is a Pakistani-American filmmaker based in Islamabad. Her introduction to film was as an actor in an indie film called Slakistan, a portrayal of the meandering elite hipsters of Islamabad at the time. Ms. Akhtar has made music videos for many of Pakistan's top artists, including Uzair Jazwal, Adil Omar, Talal Qureshi, Shamoon Ismail, Kuratulain Baloch, and Ali Gul Pir. Now, Ms. Raza, she is a Pakistani Dutch economist, filmmaker, and writer. With a master's degree in economics, she has worked in strategic communication, policy, and research positions in the United Nations, World Bank, and the European Union. She has specialized in projects related to economic empowerment, emergency response, and human rights of women in marginalized groups. And she's joining us from Washington, D.C. Okay, let's get started with the questions. Tehreema, how would you describe Indriji's legacy in Pakistan?
I think the amazing thing about my mother is that she has taught for so many years and taught in so many different places. And that's the most important thing, that may not have produced as many dancers as she has always wanted, has been able to produce an audience, hopefully, and somewhat of an understanding and love for dance as being something that can be part of our lives and not just something that you see on stage and that you see in films. But I think dance is very misunderstood in Pakistan because there are not many dancers who can give live performances. So I think that by showing dance on stage to begin with, you reach new people every time, but especially when you bring them in. I mean, for dance in grammar school for 10 years. And I always meet people wherever I go. Sometimes I'm in the States or in England or somewhere besides Pakistan, and I will have somebody come up to me and say, "Oh, you're Mitha, are you Tehreema Mitha? Are you Mrs. Mitha's daughter?" And I learned from her in grammar school, you know, whether it was some people just 3 weeks and some people 3 years and more. But they remember that as a wonderful, joyous time in their lives.
Yes. And I should have said that it's not just her legacy in Pakistan, but really globally. Mm-hmm.
Yes, because we Pakistanis are good about spreading all over the world.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that really is the thing that she wanted the most. But also, of course, through her teaching, she has built communities of students who have interacted with each other, not just with her. And to bring the idea that, you know, I continue her dance style in the classical part, at least. This new form of Bharatanatyam, which uses North Indian music, whereas the themes are universal, not just Hindu mythology, but our themes are to do with the 21st century. And I think that hopefully will carry on through me and through others.
Yes. Dr. Feriyal, you're next. What would you say have been Indu Mitha's contributions to dancers and to dance writers? And if you could unmute yourself, please.
That's a good idea. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. There's so much to say about her contribution. Like, I'll start from where Tehreema ji left off. Like, so Indriji has like over 2,000 students, roughly, like the number that she says that she has, you know, taught, but like, unfortunately, or the way the dance scene is only a few of them. There's like only a handful. Maybe there's, after Tehreema ji, there's only like 4 of us who are her senior students dance. But she's impacted, and I'd like to say, I'd like to talk about where I started learning this was in Islamabad. So she traveled around Pakistan because she was posted and with her husband, and like wherever she went, she taught I think so many parts of Pakistan. So I learned in Islamabad at the institute called Mazmoon-e-Shauq. The reason I mentioned that is the word means the subject of my passion. So what I feel that Indu Mitha has given to every one of her students, even if they left dance and did other things, and this is something I feel, and I'd like to ask them when I meet them, is following your heart. So that's something, so that's the meaning of even this institute's name, Mazmoon-e-Shauq. For me, it's an institute. Actually, it's founded by her daughter, Yamima, and it's a Montessori for children, and evening classes were music and dance. So I think that the way I think, at least that's what I take from a lot of her students. Of course, there's this discipline, this teaching about, and then community building that Tehreema ji also mentioned about. But since you mentioned dance scholar, I would mention that since I will have to present my own study, because I am a good case study of how she's impacted one of her students. She would introduce all of us very early on. When I started classes with her, this was 21 years ago. Like, I joined her classes in year 2000, and I was right after my MA, my anthropology. And she would make us see a film. We saw Tehreema ji's, Shireen Pasha's documentary about Tehreema ji, and She Dances On. And then she would have us, critique it, comment it, or she encouraged us to write about it, because she was very concerned that, unfortunately, she's always frustrated about dance reviewers being done by people who know nothing about dance in Pakistan. And it's always so frustrating. So she would want her dance students to be the ones writing about dance. So, they can really have a critical eye and all. So that's where it started. And it got me to eventually be I think I'm the only trained dance scholar in Pakistan right now. It's a new field even in the US. So, but she has encouraged all of us, and I'm a result of that. But yes, like I said, only a few of her students pursue dance, so I'm the one who does dance scholarship. So yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. So Aisha, why did you make this film?
Well, I think this is a question that Anya and I should definitely answer jointly, because it was Anya that brought the topic to me, because she was the one that actually, for a brief but very impactful moment, I think, in time, did study with Mrs. Mitha and took lessons with her. And she messaged me almost a little bit out of the blue. Islamabad is a small place. So, we were acquaintances with each other, but she kind of just cold messaged me and told me about, the situation, which was that Indu Mitha was putting on her final sort of public presentation. And, as like a creator or an artist, especially when you're involved in film, it's something that if you're going to choose a project, it's going to take up at least a year, if not 2, if not 3, if not more of your life. So it can be a little bit hard to commit to something, but it was something that instantly just felt like, we have to do this. And this would be really a shame not to document, especially, as very kind of native Islamabadis and women, like, what would be a better story to, document. And though I didn't take lessons with Ms. Mitha myself, I think anybody that lives in Islamabad can attest to her impact. And, we've all grown up hearing about her. And I used to be kind of jealous of my friends that went to classes with her. Not that I couldn't go, but I wasn't really brave enough to go. I was a little bit, too shy and intimidated. So I thought this would be a good chance to kind of make up for that. And, it's never too late to learn, even if it's through a totally different medium of trying to capture that on film instead.
Well, and you see in the film that Indu Mitha does look quite intimidating with her students. She's very strict and firm, but you can just sense how much she loves her students. She wants so much for them to do well. I just love that about her. Anya, can you tell us about the reaction to the film? You've shown it in a lot of places. What are people saying about it? And if you could put on your mic, please.
Yeah, I love the comments that we're getting, because we're getting comments from all over the world. Some of the comments are, can we reconnect with Mrs. Mitha? She taught me in XYZ city. Oh, I know, or her daughter and I studied together. Or Tehreema, I have so many additional messages for you as well. It's so exciting to see how people are just connecting through this film. I think what Aisha mentioned, the fact that it is a very, very Islamabad-based film is what makes it so exciting, because it's so specific in its nature. We've been accepted in about 10 film festivals, and really seeing a community build of women, strong women, creators, all of this is coming together. So you're really starting to see a community getting built, both within Pakistan and abroad. Just this weekend, we've had over 1,000 views of the film, which is really exciting. We've had so many messages having people ask us when the film is coming to Pakistan, whether they can host films, how we can share this message. And I think that's the most exciting thing, because for us, when we made this film, it was truly about being able to share this incredible legend story, who otherwise is just in people's memories and in people's conversations. And now we're actually able to share how she inspires her students with the rest of the world. And for a moment, we can all feel like her student, as you'd said, Lisa.
And just so people know, the film is available online right now, but only until today. We had it up for just a few days for those of us who are joining us. So if you haven't seen it yet, you're going to have to see it tonight. Okay, back to Tehreema. Wikipedia says that Indu Mitha altered the performance and style of the Bharatanatyam she taught to conform to Pakistani cultural norms. What exactly did she change about the dance?
Well, Bharatanatyam has been based in storytelling, and the storytelling is really been using Hindu mythology to reach a religious purpose in a way. And in Pakistan, when she started performing in the 50s, she felt that it was not necessarily a subject to which the majority would respond and would be familiar with. So she started using traditional music to begin with, because the South Indian vocalists and instrumentalists were not really available here. And so she started, dealing with local people here and started forming the idea, which I think originally really came from the music, using the traditional Hindustani rags, as they are called, North Indian music. And then originally her dances were like more is about a young girl in a village who's very beautiful and whose beauty is celebrated in that dance, and her naughtiness and her liveliness is celebrated in the dance. There is Dukhi Hoon, which is a dance about a girl waiting for her lover. So initially her dances were more about those things. She did do some dance dramas about a storm coming through a community and what it did. And then when I joined her, my themes were a little more radical, because my whole thing was, well, I don't want to make dances about some young maiden sitting around waiting for her lover to turn up. Just isn't our mood in our generation. And she and I started working together, and I think the themes went from there. The first dance we made together is called Kul Kainat Raqs Guna Hai, which means the whole of universe dances. And the idea was, instead of doing a dance which is an opening dance, as a tribute to a god or a goddess, here was a dance about science, about astronomy, and about the universe, about how everything in the universe is in movement, just as it is on Earth, with the wind or the plants growing or the sea moving, and us. And so it celebrates life. Movement celebrates life. Life is movement, and that sort of thing. And then she went on to do other things, like the dance about the Muqaddas Darakht, which is about this very old tree that is in Islamabad, which has meant a lot to lots of different times in history that people have passed through this area. So it was to bring universal themes that anybody of any age, wherever you are in the world, could connect to. And then also creating the music became such an important part for us that we've, always made our own music and therefore been in touch with our wonderful, very unappreciated sometimes classical vocalists and musicians. And this says, this is a very different style to anybody in the world.
Yes, you used the word naughtiness. And I have to say, I think that's a word we could use to describe Indu Mitha. She's naughty. And I love her quote in the film when she said, "They said don't dance, and I danced." So of course, naughty in a good way. Dr. Feriyal, do you think that Indu Mitha's work has had an impact on interfaith harmony?
Yes, and I'm glad that Tehreema ji mentioned the dance about the sacred tree, because that's an excellent example of that. So this is about the Bodhi tree in Islamabad that was burned down. So I'll just give you an example of that. But before I do that, what Tehreema ji also mentioned is really precious about, I call it or she would herself also call it the philosophical approach to the content of, the stories. So this particular dance form, like Bharatanatyam, especially if you look at it, Bharatanatyam popularly across the border in India and in the Indian diaspora, it's very, it's been more and more religized, and it's become, part of this whole nationalist, like after partition of India, Pakistan, it's like a national dance. And anyway, I think what Indu Mitha does, interestingly, in the Pakistan context is freeze it, because she looks at those God stories as, this is her approach, because I think this is her lineage. Interestingly, Tehreema ji can tell us more too, but she comes from a family of philosophers. So I think the way she looks at these stories is like, she calls them anthropomorphic. So the God stories become for her stories of, a man and woman in love. And it's like, that's how she views them. And that becomes, and it's really, I realized a lot of the incredible work and her genius in creating this after I left for my Fulbright, and I encountered other, Indian friends and Bharatanatyam from India, in Hawaii, like from friends from, and that's when I really realized, oh my God, like what we took for granted here in the classes, and maybe you don't even realize that, it's what a genius Indriji is, and how much work she's put in making this indigenous, creating this dance form according to the local, musicians and the language and the translation and all of that. So anyway, and then there comes the content, right? So like Tehreema ji mentioned also, so she, by choosing, I think her also interest in raising issues, whatever would, she thinks like what needs to be addressed for forgotten, or like this, about this tree, or about this Buddhist community and their tree. So in a way, she creates this space. And I want to just leave you guys to answer this with one word about inclusivity. It's one of the conversations me and Indriji had, because I've been like, talking to her and documenting her for a long time now, since my ongoing project and my ethnographic document and for my thesis. So I remember once talking to her, and she said something about people, go on and on about tolerance. Like they say, it's this buzzword, tolerance is so important. But she said, I don't like this word. Why should you only tolerate someone? That's when I proposed that I think her work is all about inclusivity. So what she tries to do is not just put up with somebody, but like really create that space where you can celebrate that. And I'll just give an example from the film. Like you see a clip of Indriji and myself, and trying to this choreography about ode to aesthetics. And it's interesting how like she's co-choreographing with me, and how she lets her dancers, create, even if it doesn't agree with her point of view. Like, it's like she's saying, I know I'm not spiritual, but she let me, like we were stuck at the ending, and we were really stuck. And then she called me the next day. We were just 2 days before the performance, right? And then she calls me because we didn't like the ending. It was just like, and then she said, you know what? I think we've gotten too stuck in the symbols, because it started with this goddess of Saraswati. And she thought, especially because now I'm married to an Indonesian and I perform in Indonesia also, that, you know, Indonesians really celebrate, Indonesian Muslims really celebrate all of these gods. So she thought of this dance for me, but then we got stuck. And then she said to me that morning, 2 days before the performance, we were stuck with the ending. And she said, you know, I want you to, and it's not her interest in like Sufi. She knows I'm interested in Sufism and Sufi Islam. And so she gave me something that I was into. And she said, why don't you listen to this CD, Man Kunto Mola? She gave me this Sufi Qawwali that she's totally not into, but she knows that it will motivate me to create an ending that works for me. And, you know, that is so precious for our generation, to allow that space for someone that you totally disagree with their point of view, but you let them be, and you let them be the best of what will come out of them. And that is, I think, so precious space for our generation in Pakistan, my generation that, you know, grew up after Bangladesh is separate and India's truncated Pakistan and this is very Muslim space. And this generation, I think this is the biggest contribution of Indriji, and very much so. Interfaith harmony is a very precious gift that she gives to all of her students.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, I go on. I'm so passionate about it.
Yeah, it's noted. That's great. So Anya, in the film synopsis, you say that we now live in a time when women's views, lives, and bodies are a battleground in the so-called clash of civilizations. Can you expand on that, and how is that illustrated in the film?
I understand that's quite a loaded sentence. I was very impassioned also when I was writing it, but it seems very evident. It's not too difficult. If you pick up any newspaper, if you read any headline, you'll see women somewhere in the world are topic of conversation. What a woman is doing, how she's wearing, what she's doing with her body, how she's choosing to express herself, whether she's leaving the house, whether she's staying at home. These are always topics that under great scrutiny. And we can talk about why that is, but I'd like to deviate from that a little bit and really just show that what the power of Mrs. Mitha's work is. We see how impassioned her students are. We see the impact she has on making her students think not just what their body is doing, but how they're choosing to express what they're trying to say with their bodies. And there's a lot of power in that, because if a woman is strong in her own body, if she feels confidence, if she is confident enough to take up space and therefore willing to lean into a conversation and say what is necessary, that impact is profound. I know that Aisha mentioned that I'd been a student with her when I was 8 years old. We felt that at 8 years old. We felt that. Little girls, shy girls in Islamabad who were not told to be confident and comfortable with their bodies, who were already feeling sexualized. And then suddenly you have this woman who is telling you, no, think about what you're doing. What are you doing when you stand with your spine straight? What are you doing when you're expressing yourself with your hands like this? And so when I say clash of civilizations, truly a woman having autonomy in her own body from birth up to this point, for some reason is contentious. And yet here you have Mrs. Mitha who's saying, no, your body is your own, your expressions are your own. And here is a medium in which you can express yourself. That was the most exciting thing, observing the impact that she had on her students from all walks of life. And truly that was her impact also with us when we were making the film as filmmakers, that we should be confident in our bodies, in our medium, in taking up space within our medium. And I think that's been truly the largest impact that she's had on anybody she comes across. She's so inspiring.
Well said, thank you. So Aisha, tell me about the title of the film. I love the title, How She Moves. When you came up with the title, was it really just referring to how Mrs. Mitha moves physically, or is it something more symbolic?
Well, again, I will have to point out that Anya did come up with the title, and it's funny because we barely had any time for pre-production or anything like that. We kind of just, Anya got to Pakistan and we kind of hit the ground running. So it was our working title for a long time because I wasn't quite sold on it. I thought maybe it might be a little too on the nose, but I mean, that very much changed as we sort of went through the process. Well, me actually filming them and watching them. And then once we got into the editing room, it was very clear that that was kind of the balance of what we were trying to show as well. The physicality of movement, but then also how she moves, how she moves her students and how she moves the people around her, in a more sort of mental way, whatever that is that anybody chooses to do, she has an impact on them. So by the end, it was kind of a no-brainer, and that the title was a little stroke of genius by Anya in the beginning that I didn't have faith in until I saw, Indu Mitha really live and breathe, and it became very real for me as well. So yeah.
Great. I'm so glad you kept it.
Me too.
Okay, Tehreema, tell us, have you ever faced any resistance from society for your passion for dance?
Before I answer that, I do want to make a point about when talking about her style, that though the stories and the music have been something that she has developed, which are very different to the traditional Bharatanatyam, the technique remains the same. And it is a style that comes from the area of Kalakshetra, a particular institute where they do a very athletic style. So I want to just say that when you come to see the dance form, you realize how athletic it is. And that ties in with what Anya was saying about how it makes your body feel, because I think the thing that people are afraid of is that when women are more sure of their bodies, when the mind-body connection is really strong, and when you feel more empowered because you have that connection, that woman is scary to a lot of society. As far as passion goes and how people respond, well, generally, as I said, dance is misunderstood. And dance is seen as something that is connected to either prostitution or call girls, because we have been fed this for so long through the idea that in the Mughal court, for example, the girls who danced were all courtesans who came from the Hira Mandi, and otherwise you see them in Bollywood, where the exposure and the intent of the dance is very different. I always feel that once people come and see, things are very different. And I don't like to go into an area or a performance with any presumption about how the audience is going to react, because you would be really surprised at who loves what. Sometimes, you have the most conservative people who will like the contemporary work, because I do both contemporary and classical. And I've had, fathers of friends or women who haven't seen the dance before. They've convinced their father to come, who's been really, really anti the dance. And he will come wearing his namaz ki topi and, looking very upset. And I've had messages sent to me saying, please tell Tehreema, I really enjoyed that. And she has turned my idea around about what dance is. And then there are people who come with great, oh, I know everything sort of thing. And they come and they watch the dance and they're surprised. And they might like, being young people coming in to watch something contemporary, may end up liking the classical a lot. So I really think that there are huge obstacles because of ignorance and because they have not been given the option to see. And really, how many people do we manage to reach? Because media still does not show dance in any full way. It's in excerpts, in montages, in little bits and pieces. And really a full evening the way we do it, like I give 2-hour solo performances, I give 2-hour performances with ensembles. So you really have an evening to establish dance. That rarely happens in Pakistan. So, you are looked down upon by a lot of society, misunderstood by a lot of society. You have to get permission to dance in places. You have to be extremely careful about where you dance, because none of us wants to be martyr or to be, have some scandal attached with, this is what happened at that performance. That's not what you're looking for. You're looking for reaching people. So one of the big troubles, and talking beside myself, is that the young girls who come to us to dance, there's a certain level of society they have to come from for their parents to allow them to come to dance to begin with. And then the minute they hit a critical age, it becomes a thing you don't do because it makes you less marriageable. Or once you start working, it's the first thing to fall by the wayside. And this means that my mother and I, who for both taught, I've run a company for, going on to 25 years now, we have no real professional dancer. I am my mother's only professional dancer. So dance student who became a dancer. So this is a big problem about carrying on.
Right. And how about you, Dr. Feriyal? Have you ever met any resistance as a dance scholar and someone who advocates dance?
Yes, but before that, I will also mention a little about, because I guess I learned dance first, and then I went on to become, learn and start performing, and then pursue a dance scholarship after my anthropology. So absolutely, I would say, since adding to what Tehreema ji said about families, and I mean, I come from a very educated middle class, I would say, family. So I still, till very recently, I was not encouraged to dance by my mother. But interestingly, my father, quite a visionary, and always in our house, there was always like, okay, follow your heart, and, that kind of sort of support. But what I will just say, I feel, especially after my experience, so growing up, I didn't realize so much. I would just say this overall stigma for the arts that you feel. And then within that, dance is like, I think, worst off, so there's the stigma that my brother's a professional TV artist, filmmaker. My sister was also, one of the first women of her sort of like class to come on Pakistan television. Like, she was a Fulbrighter too, by the way, many, many years ago. So there's the artists and the place of the artist in our society. And then there is the dancer. And I think it's at the bottom. And then within the classical dancers, there's Kathak, and then there's Bharatanatyam, which has like even further layers of misunderstanding about this being Hindu, Indian dance and all of that. So absolutely, I just want to leave this point about the place, and it's nothing to do with, I don't think it's got much to do with Islam, by the way. And I want to say that because now having collaborated with Indonesian artists and working with the embassy of Indonesia after coming back from my PhD, I got a chance to, I could compare like the way that artists are respected. And I involved Indu Mitha's other dancers, and we collaborated and we worked with the Indonesian embassy, and I put up a dance collaboration with Indonesian artists too. And they were all amazed. We were all like, look how well we are treated. So there is like this a big issue around the place of the artist, and then particularly the dancer. And then there's a female dancer, what Tehreema ji already mentioned. So that's that. I mean, it's changing slightly, but that's why it's such a mission to keep talking and to educate people about this beautiful art form and the difference between the dance, the classical dance, and creating awareness about it. So absolutely, I still have arguments with my mother about my dance. She's just worried about what the people say, and then my father. And I just want to say this something to any fathers of daughters out there, and like let them follow their heart. You'll be amazed at like, you know, what they achieve, and they need your support really. So I'm just leaving that out there.
Great. So
I
I
just
have
want to
lots
jump
of
in here
questions.
because I have a relative. Sorry, may I?
Yes, I was just going to mention for our audience that I have lots of questions, but I would love to get some questions from the audience. So if you can please send us your questions, we can ask those of the panelists. Go ahead, Tehreema.
Well, I just wanted to join with that about the, so the second film that was made on about me and my dance was done by a young Indonesian man, Arya Surawijo. And Arya got in touch with me because he had seen me perform, and he was just amazed to hear the fact that I had so much trouble performing in my culture and my country, because in Indonesia, which has the largest population of Muslims, a lot of the dancers who perform the Mahabharata are actually Muslim. Most of them are. And most of them who do a lot of the other forms of puppetry and dancing are actually Muslim. And sometimes they're even doing performances about things which are about Hindu mythology. And he just couldn't, you know, get his mind around the fact that this was a problem in another Muslim nation. So that was a really interesting interaction. Also, when we are talking about women's bodies, we mustn't forget men dancing and the problems that men have, which are different, because most men who dance are considered gay. And then whether they are or they aren't, they are treated that way as being less male. And, you know, I think that's got a lot to do with the fact that when you dance and you're using your body as your language, then men are intimidated by the vulnerability that you have to be on stage or to dance or to let yourself speak through your body, because the body is a very intimate thing in many ways.
Thanks for adding that. So Aisha and Anya, tell me, what do you love most about the film?
Okay, I will go first. I mean, in a broad sense, there's, you know, a lot of sort of universal messages to take away from it, which is of course something that you always want to be able to hit. You want to be able to reach and affect and touch as many people as possible. But, you know, one thing that I really like is it's often as a filmmaker in Pakistan, or especially a documentarian, I think you can be a little bit tempted to pick up topics that aren't nearly as positive or wholesome or inspiring. So the fact that it's just an overall very positive story is for me a big win. And other than that, I also, you know, think there aren't enough stories about older women that are told, and you know, as young women, as middle-aged women, as whatever age you are, or even as men, you know, you don't see enough messaging that age is, you know, there's that message that you only have a few good years left. That's so prevalent in all the media that you consume. So to be able to tell a story about somebody who is, you know, 90 years old, and this person probably has more passion for life than a lot of the young people that I know, and is, you know, thriving, and not only thriving, but it's also, you know, not a story about a woman who is so strong based on maybe adopting very sort of traditionally male traits. She's so strong and powerful, but she's at the same time extremely delicate and feminine. And I think that was a big part of what I personally loved about the topic in the film. And then of course, just being able to absorb, you know, just the amount that I learned myself, just being there and absorbing and watching the dancers and seeing the process that goes into everything, and applying that to my own self and my own, you know, creative endeavors. And probably on the most personal level, you know, when you talked about how she moves, I was, you know, I didn't have the privilege of going to Indu Mitha when I was younger. And especially, I think when you live in Pakistan, probably anywhere, you're so used to kind of like you're slouching and you're hiding, and that's how I was. And even Anya shows me pictures of the first few days that we were filming, and I'm like standing like this. And it was through halfway through probably editing the film that I was inspired enough myself to kind of change that about myself and take part in a lot more physical activities, which in turn changed a lot of other things in my life. So I felt the effects myself very strongly. And yeah, so that's what I loved about it. Anya?
I'm enjoying hearing that from you, Aisha, as well, because just witnessing both of us and how basically Mrs. Mitha was, we studied her for 3 years. We spent hours and hours and hours decoding her interviews, decoding her students' interviews, working with people, working with Pakistanis, and mostly Pakistanis actually on our team, and really seeing, in fact, how certain quotes and certain things that she said, they just resonated. I would have my editor in New York or in Karachi, they would write me 2 o'clock in the morning saying, "Oh, knowledge to me is knowing," or another quote from Mrs. Mitha in the film that really just kind of like allowed people to go, what would Mrs. Mitha tell me to do right now? How would she approach the situation? She'd say, "Buck up, just keep going." And that was, as Aisha said, that's something that, these traits are something that we absorbed through studying her. And, not becoming dance students, but more, this entire film is really just trying to cover the legacy and the spirit of her as a teacher. We could never cover all of her choreography. She has 60 years of experience as a dancer, so there's no way we could cover that, but we could try and get the essence of her spirit. And we tried, but the essence of her spirit for us, at least for me, was very much about like, be brave. Like Aisha said, be brave. You can, you should, you have it in you. And then just, in a moment when I wasn't feeling brave, just to think of how, the very specific struggles that Mrs. Mitha had in making herself heard and seen and being visible and being respected while doing so and building community. All of that is just, as a creator, but as a student watching her, as an audience, all of these messages resonate, and they continue to resonate. And I really hope they do for the people who watch as well.
Thank you. All right, we have our first question from one of our viewers, and it's for Tehreema. How do you see the future of this art in Pakistan?
I think it's an uphill struggle, because I think the thing that we lack in Pakistan is institutions which are there to help support artists and therefore funding. Dance is called the orphan of the arts for a reason. Just to even practice it, you need space, and space is an expensive thing. And I have to say, I have suffered because I have had to dance on the wrong floors and the wrong surfaces most of my life. So you need to be able to pay for space to have space. And that means a lot of empty space. And then you have to pay your musicians, you have to be able to pay for recording, for costumes. If you eventually get on a stage, somebody has to pay for all of that, for the lighting design. And just give class for so long and keep teaching if nobody is going to go beyond that. So institutions are really important, and institutions should be funded by not just government, because our government has a lot of things to do. So culture, of course, is something that should be funded, but we have a lot of rich people in this country. What are they doing with their money? Because they need to put money towards culture. And I can tell you, I was asked to talk at a business people's conference in DC, where there were a lot of people from different Desi backgrounds, a lot of Pakistani men particularly, and they said, "Why should we fund you? You're telling us you're often in the red." And I said, that's exactly why. Because if you think that you can take your business to other countries, if your country doesn't have a good promotion of its culture and self, then you're mistaken. Your image abroad and at home matters, and image is culture. And what are you doing about it? So we need funding from the citizens of this country who have that cash, and we need support from communities to build institutions where artists can feel stable and therefore be able to create. Because if you don't know where you're going to be tomorrow, then if you can do that and have regular classes and not, people have to come and learn the basics. And when you learn the basics, I mean, just keep in mind, you go to weddings now, nobody dances folk dances anymore. They're all lost. Our tradition of singing tapas and singing wedding songs are dying. Where's it going to go? You're going to have Bollywood take over. It is taking over.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we've got a fantastic question from one of our viewers for Anya and Aisha. What should aspiring filmmakers do to overcome funding issues to start off passion projects?
Well, I mean, I would say that, we are in an age where, at least to kind of practice your craft, where before you couldn't even attempt to practice your craft without a lot of kind of support, somehow going to some kind of studio to get equipment or, begging and borrowing. Like, you can do a smaller scale project, even if it's on your phone or on whatever kind of camera that you have. And, there's nothing that can replace actually doing. So I would say that you should try on whatever small scale that you can. And through that process, you will encounter a lot of issues and mistakes that the only way to sort of learn them is to kind of face them. And after that, there's a lot that can happen, and we're also kind of a lot more in charge of what we put out into the world. You don't need any particular platform. You can create and kind of put it out there in a way that was not possible before. So it's hard to think sometimes in those terms, but there's a lot that you can do with very little. And in fact, Anya and I didn't actually have any funding until, I would say, the day before the performance actually started, because what we had said to each other was that whether we get the grant or not, let's just go for it and try our best whether we get the grant or not. Luckily, I had a camera. So all you really need is a camera, and our phones at this point are almost good enough in a lot of ways, especially if it's only content for web. So basically, if that's all you have, use that and practice. And then the rest will come to you once you practice and share.
Anything you want to add, Anya?
Yeah, somebody gave me some really good advice when I was starting out as well, because it's really easy to get overwhelmed with this magnificent story and you're trying to figure out how to capture it and where and what, and seeing how it's done by other professionals. It's very easy to try and reach that same level. But as you're starting out, as Aisha said, there are going to be a lot of things that you're learning and you're trying to figure out. So perhaps less is more. Try to contain your story. Try to find the through line of your story. If you're using a cell phone, if you are using YouTube videos and tutorials, make a 2-minute video, make a 2-minute teaser for yourself about what your story is. And then you'll be able to distill from there. If you give yourself really clear goalposts, then automatically you're going to start creating community, because you'll be going to create a content that you can share. So much of our work was just saying, hey, this is a work in progress. We're working on this. We really believe in this, but it's not perfect yet. And this is, the film took 3.5 years to make. So we had to keep, with the various works and projects and process that we have, we had to apply for funding, get feedback, get support, in-kind funding. It's not just cash that works. So much that works is advice, support, getting other people to offer their resources to you. So don't just think that if you don't have money, that you don't have the ability to move forward with this, with your project. But the main thing is just try and stay focused and create small goals for yourself so that you can keep moving forward. But I mean, my first idea for a project was a 4-part episodic series about women across Pakistan, and I'd never made a documentary before, so naturally I was aiming too high. So just kind of coming back and understanding and really learning what I could was very helpful in just kind of distilling what my own voice was as well.
Thank you. So Tehreema, we have 2 questions for you from a viewer. What can individuals do in their personal capacity to destigmatize the stigma associated with performing arts?
Well, I think for those who do not know dance themselves and do not participate, bring an audience, put up a performance. I can't tell you how many times I've had people come and say, what can we do? And I said, call me, let's have a performance. And because there is nothing like live performance, and bring people to them. I mean, I know a couple of Pakistanis in Maryland, where I live, or in the greater area, who bring more people to watch every time they themselves come, especially people who have not seen dance or not seen dance from Pakistan. And it's a eye-opener to a lot of people. And if you can't do something like that, please do go on for example, go on my YouTube channel and see what we are showing of our dances and the stories behind them and the insights, and people can get on there and have conversations. And we are going to be releasing a dance every month. But besides that, we're going to release what happens behind the stage, what happens when you practice, things like that. And I would also ask people to please think about, you now have the web. You can watch anybody from the world. Don't give the title of dancer easily, because then when your standards fall and you are having a lot of rubbish done, it immediately brings back that stigma and brings problems with it. So dance comes with a lot of training, a lot of daily work for years and years. You're not waiting, you're not dancing more. You're dancing to perfect. And for that, if a standard and quality is kept, and you bring people, you need to, by the way, I have a lot of professors, and that we can do first is come, second, bring other people. And if you have the resources, set up performances and ask for quality.
Very good. Thank you, Tehreema. So we have time for one more question. And this one is for Anya and Aisha from one of our viewers. If this documentary was not bound by time restrictions, what is something that you would have liked to show the world but couldn't?
A simple answer to that is we would have loved to show more dance. We would have loved to show more complete dances. We would have loved to kind of go a little bit more into the particulars of the dance and exactly how it's communicated, because, we couldn't really go too deep into it. But that was one thing that we wish we could have, done a little bit more of if time wasn't such a precious commodity. And then the other thing, and then I'll pass it to Anya, but I also wish that we could have shown even more of Mrs. Mitha's personality, because although I do hope it comes through in the film, how vibrant and charming and funny and quirky she can be, believe me when I say we have a lot more footage that, we wish we could have just included all of it, quite frankly. And all of her wonderful anecdotes that we got to hear through the process of interviewing her multiple times. They were so interesting, and yeah, I wish that we could have included more.
Sure. And how about you, Anya?
So when we were exploring all of the various storylines of the film, it became very apparent that there were so many themes and messages and paths we could go down. But the central character, the most important one that was tying everything together, was Mrs. Mitha. And when we started spending time, as Aisha said, going through the history, it became very evident. It was almost like the history of Pakistan was being narrated to us, back to us. So we have this person who has existed for longer than Pakistan has, and is talking about the movement of people across a border, the movement of culture, the shifts in an identity. I think that in itself lends so much to us understanding what history actually is and who tells us what history is and how history is censored or not. And it comes through people's stories, lived people's stories, that you actually start seeing that, oh, maybe the dominant narrative is not the whole truth. And I think that's a lot when we start talking about our identity as Pakistanis, we kind of forget that. We think our identity started in 1947, but it didn't. It started thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. And having a legend such as Mrs. Mitha convey this to us in the most matter-of-fact, charming manner possible, you can't dispute that. And I think that we would have loved to spend more time with her, perhaps figured out a different format where we could truly share that, because this isn't a lecture that she's giving. This is through the most poetic anecdote possible. She's telling you what the facts are about your history. So we learned a lot from her, and we hope in some way that we can pass on some of that reflective quality of her teaching to the audience through the film as well. But yeah, maybe this isn't the end of it. Let's see.
Sequel. So
Could I add
speaking of
something,
time,
Lisa? If
oh
there's a
sure,
minute.
Dr. Feriyal, why don't you help us close, because we've been talking for more than an hour now. So go ahead.
It's just, I just want to take a moment for gratitude, because I'm literally looking back at the start of this project, for me, the bigger project of writing my Fulbright to research stigma, the women performing arts, face. And sorry. And anyway, I just, there are some questions about passion projects and funding, and I just got nostalgic because I'm sitting in the same place where I wrote this Fulbright grant so many years ago. And anyway, and which grew to be my PhD project, and which, when Indu Mitha was looking for funding for her 2017 show and not finding what support anywhere, thinking of just asking around people. So I thought, okay, let me approach Fulbright. Maybe we can get some support for her, final project. And that's how this whole film came about as well, as part of that project. So really, I really want to thank Fulbright for that support for dance in Pakistan. So, this whole journey. So I think this is the forum for I just take a moment for that gratitude and that support. And hopefully there will be lots more support from other avenues.
Well, the U.S. Embassy is very pleased that we were a part of all of this in funding the Fulbright program, and also our Alumni Association that provided the initial funding for the film. So it's been a great collaboration, and along the lines of the title, How She Moves, I mean, all of you have really moved me, and the film has moved me, and I look forward to seeing it a third time or fourth. And thank you everyone for being with us, Tehreema, Dr. Feriyal, Aisha, Anya, and to PUAN for hosting this webinar. And thanks to all of our viewers for joining us. Have a good evening.
Thank you.